We're hearing from the mother of Aureon Grace, the 24-year-old who was shot and killed inside of Smith State Prison in Glenville.
She was a sister, she was a daughter, she was a mother, she was loved. She worked 11 days straight, 14 days straight, just to make money, to make sure she could provide for her kids.
On the morning of June 16, 2024, DeShonda Hagens did not get a phone call from the Georgia Department of Corrections telling her daughter had been shot and killed inside a maximum security prison kitchen while on the clock. She did not get a call from Aramark, the company that had hired her daughter and sent her through those prison doors every single morning for 5 months. What she got instead was a message on social media from an inmate, a man behind bars who had used a contraband phone to search through her daughter's profile, piece together who her family was, and reach out himself because nobody in any official capacity had bothered to pick up a phone and do it first. That is how she found out Aureon was gone. And if you think that is the most disturbing detail in this story, you have not heard the rest of it yet. Because that same contraband phone, the kind that was never supposed to exist inside that facility, had already been used months earlier by inmates to take photographs of a loaded gun that had been sitting inside those prison walls for nearly a full year while the state of Georgia looked the other way. While warnings were ignored, while a 24-year-old mother from Statesboro showed up to work every morning, trusting that the institution around her was doing its job. Aureon Grace walked into that kitchen before 4:30 on a Sunday morning. She never walked back out. She was a sister, she was a daughter, she was a mother, she was loved. This is Fatal Rejection, and this one is going to stay with you. Subscribe before you go any further. Thank you. Aureon Grace was 24 years old and from Statesboro, Georgia. Born and raised there, still there, because Statesboro was home and home was where her people were. Her assistant principal from Statesboro High School said this after she died. I had the pleasure of teaching math to Aureon her junior year. Aureon had the most beautiful smile. She lit up the room when she walked in. She had 2 children, a 4-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son, and those 2 kids were not just the people she loved most, they were the engine behind every decision she made. She would work 11 days straight, 14 days straight, just to make money to make sure she could provide for her kids. She was also putting money aside for nursing school, building toward a stable career in healthcare one paycheck at a time. She had a plan and the discipline to follow it. In January 2024, she took a job with Aramark, a Philadelphia-based company holding the food service contract at Smith State Prison in Glenville, Georgia, about an hour south of Statesboro. She commuted in every morning, worked the kitchen, and came home to her children. She had been there 5 months when June 16th arrived. Smith State Prison sits in Glenville, in Tattnall County, deep in southeast Georgia. It holds more than 1,500 inmates across multiple housing units behind reinforced perimeter fencing and armed watchtowers, with metal detectors at the front entrance that every staff member, contractor, and visitor passes through before stepping inside. On paper, that is a facility designed to contain everything. By the time Aureon started her first shift in January 2024, Smith State Prison had been deteriorating from the inside for well over a year. In February 2023, the prison's warden, Brian Adams, was arrested on charges of racketeering, bribery, falsifying statements, and violating his oath of public office. Every charge tied to a contraband smuggling operation running through the facility on his watch. He was fired. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation handled the case. That was the person running the institution. 8 months after Adams was arrested, in October 2023, a corrections officer named Robert Clark was attacked from behind with a homemade weapon while escorting inmates. He did not survive. He was 42 years old, and his death was the first fatal staff attack at that facility. Through all of this, the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division had an active investigation into the Georgia prison system that had been running since September 2021, with no public findings. That was the place Aureon drove to every morning, a facility where the warden had been arrested for running contraband, where a corrections officer had just been killed, where federal investigators were already watching. Nobody told her any of that when she signed her paperwork with Aramark. Investigators later determined that a firearm was introduced to Smith State Prison sometime between late June and early July of 2023. Thrown over the outer perimeter fence, then passed between inmates until it landed with Jadricus Hart, who was trusted by the people around him to hold it. What makes this worse is that the warning came before the gun did. In May 2023, before the firearm ever cleared that fence, a civil rights advocate named Brian Randolph received a tip that a weapon was going to be delivered to the facility.
We were tipped off in May of last year of a possible weapon that had been dropped off via a drone.
He contacted the Georgia Department of Corrections directly, sending a message to the department's general counsel with exactly what he had been told.
We never heard anything else about it.
The department investigated, developed no leads, and closed the case. The gun came over the fence anyway, and by January 2024, the same month Aureon started her job, inmates were photographing it on contraband phones and sharing the images inside the prison. A loaded firearm was being documented on devices that were not supposed to exist inside a facility that was supposed to be impenetrable, while a young mother from Statesboro was clocking in for her first shifts in the kitchen. On June 13, 2024, the Georgia Department of Corrections received confirmed intelligence that the firearm was still concealed somewhere inside Smith State Prison. The person holding it was not identified. No one was removed from the general population. 3 days later, it was Sunday morning. Jadricus Hart was 34 years old and serving a 20-year sentence for voluntary manslaughter and aggravated battery out of Carroll County, Georgia. His maximum release date was June 2043. He was never supposed to walk out of Smith State Prison a free man for another 19 years. He worked the kitchen. So did Aureon. 5 months of the same pre-dawn shifts, the same enclosed space, the same two people showing up before the rest of the world was awake. The GDC would later describe what developed between them as a personal relationship. The family's attorney said the family themselves did not fully know its extent. What became clear in the aftermath was that Aureon had been pulling back from it, and that Hart had decided that was not her choice to make. The note he left behind said everything. Quote, "Ari, I told you nobody else gets your smile. If I can't see it, nobody will. I love you. Forgive me." That is not the language of someone losing someone. That is the language of someone who believed he owned her, and that if he could not have her, neither could the world. At approximately 4:30 that morning, Hart asked the other workers to clear the room. According to an inmate's account obtained by investigators, they did. The door closed, and then he shot her. She fell. He shot her again. Then he turned the gun on himself. Aureon was pronounced dead at the scene. Hart was transported to a hospital where he died from his injuries. One inmate's account, sent as a text message and later passed to investigators by Deshanda's daughter, read, "J Money asked can they get the room to themselves, and they left. Soon as they walk out, he shot her in the head. She fell off the countertop and he shot her again, then shot himself." There was one more message after that, one the family later deleted because they could not hold on to it. An inmate wrote that Aureon's last words were, "But I have children." Not his name, not a plea for herself, her children. In the hours that followed, every official channel went quiet. The Georgia Department of Corrections said nothing. Aramark said nothing. No call was made to Statesboro. No one came to the door. The institution that had employed Aureon, housed the man who killed her, and held confirmed intelligence about the weapon 3 days before she died, that institution could not find the decency to pick up a phone. What happened instead was that an inmate inside Smith State Prison, using one of the contraband phones that had been documenting the weapon since January, searched Aureon's social media, found a family member, and reached out. Think about it. DeShonda found out her daughter was dead through a message sent by a stranger behind bars. By the time the Georgia Department of Corrections was prepared to make any official notification, DeShonda and her family had already driven themselves to the prison. GDC leadership was still responding to the scene. A spokesperson later confirmed the family arrived on their own, were escorted to a private area of the facility, and remained there for approximately 7 hours while investigators worked in a waiting room at a prison after learning through social media that their daughter was gone. After the shooting, investigators from the Georgia Department of Corrections entered Aureon's apartment in Statesboro. What DeShonda found when she arrived is something she has spoken about publicly, and something the GDC has never responded to. They destroy my daughter's house. They took trash out of the dumpster in her apartment complex. All my grandchildren's stuff was in there, and they opened those trash bags up, left old food, trash, dirty diapers, all that stuff in my daughter's home. What does that have to do with an inmate having a gun to kill my child? The GDC did not comment publicly on this allegation. DeShonda's interpretation was clear. The focus was on building a narrative around what Aureon had done, the relationship, the policy violation, rather than what had been done to her daughter and what had been allowed to happen inside those walls. She pushed back on that every time it came up.
No way that a family should lose a mama or a child, a daughter, because she's in a bad relationship. The focus should be on the system acknowledging that they should do some stuff, take some precautions to stop stuff like this from happening.
She was not defending every choice her daughter made. She was refusing to let those choices become the reason nobody had to answer for the gun.
The state of Georgia moved quickly to look like it was responding. Governor Brian Kemp announced a full assessment of the prison system conducted by an outside firm. Commissioner Tyrone Oliver spoke about contraband removal initiatives and staff retention, noting that approximately $7 million in contraband had been seized statewide in recent years. None of that addressed this specific sequence of failures. A gun had been inside Smith State Prison for nearly a year before it was used. The department received a tip in May 2023 and closed the investigation. Confirmed intelligence arrived 3 days before June 16th, and the weapon still was not found. The state legislature had a panel examining inmate and staff safety. Multiple reviews, multiple announcements. Aureon Grace still lost her life. DeShonda Haggins filed a lawsuit in Fulton County State Court against the Georgia Department of Corrections, alleging that prison staff were warned repeatedly that a gun was on the premises and did nothing about it. That lawsuit is still active. She is raising both of Aureon's children now, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, a year older than when her mother died. She goes to sleep every night in a house that holds what her daughter left behind, and she has not gone quiet. Every time someone redirects to the relationship or the policy or what Aureon should have done differently, DeShonda points back to the same things. The gun, the year it sat inside those walls, the 3 days between confirmed intelligence and June 16th, and the phone call that nobody made. DeShonda Haggins is still fighting. That lawsuit is still open. The Georgia Department of Corrections has still not fully answered for what happened inside those walls on June 16, 2024. If this story reached you, if Aureon reached you, leave her name in the comments. Just her name, Aureon. Fatal Rejection will be back.